Well, good evening to you, Grenada, Carriacou, PD, Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. To you, wherever you are, welcome to this another edition of Beyond the Headlines. For today, the 13th day of the month of February. I want to say thanks for being part of this evening's conversation. And those of you that join us via GBN's television, Channel 7, Channel 11, Channel 20 if you're on cable, or you're joining us via radio, via, of course, 105.5 and 105.9. We say thanks for being part of the conversation. And those of you that's on social media, our website, YouTube page, and our Facebook channel, we say thanks for being with us. I'm Joseph Cadore, replacing Colin Dow, and I'm certainly saying thank you for being here with us. This evening, I want to say thanks to my guest that has joined me in studio. To my immediate left, with a wonderful smile, I want to say thanks to the Manager of Production and Quality at NAWASA, Shamila Ragoobir. Thank you for being here. She's also joining us. The man has become part of the GBN family, Mr. Gerard Tamar, Climatologist at the Met Office. Sandwiched between, to his immediate left, is that of Sergeant Thaddeus Hamilton of the Royal Grenada Police Force, and to the extreme end, not by any way by discounted her function, we say thanks to the Manager of Met Services, Cecile Mitchell. Expecting to join us later in the conversation, Dr. Terrence Walters. He should be joining us via Zoom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of the program. We're here to discuss water, climate, the dry season that has already started. And I know for many individuals, it's a scary time. The issues of water shortage, if ever, storage capacity by NAWASA for the police, bushfires and everything. And for you guys at the Met Office, you're forced to keep us Grenadians at ease as to what is or what isn't happening. To brace the subject, I want us to start with you, Jerry, on the whole issue of the climate. And we've been talking, persons talking about the nights are colder, the days are hotter. Let's put this into perspective. People may be asking, what's happening? Is this natural, or is this something over there that we need to be wary of?
Okay, Joseph, first of all, good night to everyone, the listening public, and to my fellow panelists. As you rightly say, we are now into our dry season. Now, what does that mean for the ordinary man in the street? Well, based on our climatology, which actually means the way our atmosphere behaves at this time of the year. Okay, what can we expect? We would expect, as we are experiencing now, a drier atmosphere, basically. Okay, where the moisture content of the atmosphere is much lower than it would be in the latter part of the year. Okay, now that would translate to lower rainfall. It would also translate to lower temperatures, both daytime and nighttime, because we are in the winter months. At this time, based on the tilting of the earth, we are further away from the sun, so our temperatures are lower. Okay? Our winds are generally higher at this time of the year because of the migration of the high pressure system in the Atlantic, which comes closer to us. So this is where we have a good time for sailing. A lot of sailing regattas occur throughout the Caribbean at this time of the year. This is kite season, as we know it. Okay, so this is how our atmosphere behaves at this time of the year. Okay, and we can compare that to the latter part of the year in a rainy season, where we see almost the opposite. Okay, so that is what our climatology is about. Okay. Just as the hurricane season, we have to prepare for it, because dry season brings certain challenges for different sectors, and people in the various sectors have to prepare for it. Okay? Some more adversely than others. There is always a seasonal focus, okay, which is issued by the climatologists and the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, which look at the Caribbean, the Caribbean basin. Okay? And we go from as far as the Bahamas to the north, to the Belize in the west, to the Guianas down in the south, and we look at that whole Caribbean basin, and a lot of predictions are made about the rainfall pattern, the temperatures, and when we talk about temperature, we talk about maximum temperature, minimum temperature, and of course the mean temperature, and the rainfall, and the drought concern. Okay.
You say a drought concern? Are you saying that reservedly?
No.
Or is there really a concern that should be wary of?
No, let me tell you. No, because of the varying rainfall pattern, okay, we find some areas of the Caribbean sometimes experience short-term drought. Okay, and for us in the meat industry, when we say drought, we look at different kinds of drought. There might be a meteorological drought where you might just have a period of less rainfall, okay? But that might not so much hamburg the man in the street. And then it transfers to like an agricultural drought, you know, when the farmers and livestock and vegetation start to get affected.
Right.
Okay? And then you go on to like the economic drought, you know, where it really starts to affect livelihood of the citizens. Okay?
Okay.
So there is always constant monitoring of the drought system, okay, and that is the availability of rainfall and so for day-to-day use through the region.
And certainly you would continue in your capacity to monitor and keep the populace in.
Yes, well, that those issues are revised every month.
Right.
Every month. So, and they are made public so the nation and the region can afford to know what's happening.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Now, Cecile, every day we look forward to hearing the focus for the day. So we get an appreciation for the general climate is supposed to be like. But certainly when it comes to the weather, and it's what's happening in real time. With what Jerry has intimated, what can you tell us on a day-to-day basis is happening to higher winds, lower moisture in the air, less rainfall? Put that in the position first. What does it mean really and truly for the average man on the street?
Okay, so for the average man on the street, weather gives you the current state of the atmosphere, what is happening at the time. Now, Jerry would have spoken about the dry season, stronger winds, less moisture, which is what is normally expected based on climate averages. However, during the dry season, unfortunately, we are also faced with severe weather or extreme weather pattern, which would be weather phenomena that would pose some form of threat, whether it's to our communities, whether to our coastal areas. So we need to be mindful not to put a damper on the dry season, but of course we do not want to breed complacency, and we also want people to be aware that we have had severe weather occurrences during the dry season. And I have brought some examples so that I can share with you. Just earlier this year, we would have seen a frontal system that would have draped or dipped further south into our region. That would have also brought the cooler temperatures. We would have had temperatures like 19.3 degrees Celsius in the Granite Tank. And what that would have also brought with it was turbulent seas. Now, you would have heard that between the period December 12th to 14th, we would have had 2 cruise liners that had to be turned back. We would have also had some damage to the buffer on the jetty, right? So, and also with regards to the marinas, we had very hazardous seas and above normal swell. So that was one example. Also on the 7th of January, we would have had another weather phenomena, which would have been an upper level trough, and that would have integrated with a jet, right? The jet is just an area of fast moving air. It can be the subtropical jet or the polar jet, which is further up north. And what that happens when these two systems interact, what the jet does is allow an area of outflow at the upper levels. So with outflow at the upper levels, you find that it will breed inflow at the lower levels. So even though the general trend for this time of year would be a drier climate and moisture reduction, you have these systems that actually induce that moisture surge, normally whether it's from South America into our area. Because like I said, you're having outflow aloft at the upper levels, about 20,000 to 30,000 feet, and so at the lower levels, you have a corresponding inflow of moisture.
So let me ask you, now that we've taken all of the fancy flowery language, now that we've taken all those fancy language into consideration, because you keep hearing about moisture, more moisture, the air being outside being cooler, but yet you would get, there's always the concern during the dry season, and not just in Grenada. You hear and look at other parts of the region. Only today in Jamaica, the agriculture minister was saying to farmers, listen, drought, water is going to be a scarcity. You need to start storage.
Right.
Is that a real concern for us here in Grenada?
Okay, well, I will allow Jerry to speak to what is the potential for the wet spells and dry spells. You can speak to those.
Jerry, answer me. Is this a real concern for us here at Grenada that we might be getting into a drought period?
No, not in Grenada. Remember, we look at the whole Caribbean, so different parts of the Caribbean react differently. Okay? But for us in Grenada, our forecast is a wetter than normal dry season. Okay.
A wetter than normal dry season.
Okay.
Well, that allowed me, I put you to hold on that, a wetter than normal dry season, which in my mind sounds as though that's good news. Not
well, depending on what industry you're in.
Well, that allows me now to shift the focus of the conversation to Shamila. Great news for NAWASA? Nothing much to worry about for this dry season?
Okay, well, as Mr. Tamar has alluded to, the data coming out of CIMH, the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, that is the kind of forecast and prediction data we utilize to determine the extremities of our dry season. And in that way, we formulate our dry season plan. The data shows that till the end of April 2023, we can expect above normal levels of rainfall. True to the fact that comparing December's rainfall to January, we did see an increase of 45% in volume of rainfall recorded. So that's good news. And if I can go on to tell you more aspects of the dry season plan at this point.
So we're going to get into the plan because I'm assuming with that great news from our climatologist and the folks from Met Office, you saying, hooray Grenada, you know, while we do not want to introduce complacency into the conversation, things should be pretty nice and wet for us.
Well, we still have a rigid monitoring program.
Still have a rigid monitoring program. Normally for the folks at the RGPF Fire Department, the dry season is a scary time historically, bushfires and all the concerns. Where are we as we gauge the next 6 months, Sergeant?
Well, good night to you, Joseph, and to the members of the panel and the viewers at home and abroad. The news from Jerry and Cecile is very exciting. However, we must be mindful, not because we have a focus for increase in rainfall. We must be mindful and always be prepared to deal with fires when it will occur. Because as we go further into the season, it is highly likely the focus for the first 3 months will simply move away, and then we'll move into the drier period. We have to remember that April, May, June, we still have those periods to battle out with. And with the phenomenon of evapotranspiration, with all these heavy winds we are experiencing now, it helps to further remove the moisture from the soil. Yes? And once you have the reduction in moisture from the soil, even though we have the rain, over a period of time, it will have its effect on the plants. Generally, when the plants will shed the leaves, and you'll have an abundance of what we refer to as forest litter. Sufficient abundance of fuel on the ground that will contribute to the conditions that will later come in. As the forecast says for now, it is pretty okay. It gives us the opportunity to continue to build resilience, to continue to push fire prevention and safety in the wider general public, and gives homeowners the opportunity now to ensure that around their houses that they create the necessary safety barriers within their space to ensure that when the dry season comes on in its full extent, that they are adequately prepared to deal with the situation.
I noticed that everybody's speaking quite a measuring their thoughts, that am I getting the sense that while we're experiencing an increase in rainfall now, there's the concern may just be that as we taper into the rest of the year, the possibility exists that that luxury that we now enjoy may soon become history, Jerry?
Well, you see, sometimes you have to look at the cumulative effect, okay? And remember that at this time of the year, things are drier, okay? And as Sergeant said, you have to look at things like, the shedding of the leaves and so forth, which actually accumulate after a while and then provide or poses an additional hazard. Okay? But as it goes for the outlook, okay, between now and April into May, okay, we can expect above normal rainfall now. And I'm using the term above normal rainfall because rainfall varies from place to place. Okay, so if you have a good sense of what your rainfall amount is, okay, you can do your own prediction. For example, January at Point Celine, okay, the average is 64.4 millimeters of rainfall for January, but we got 111. Okay, now February is on course or is on the right track now to breaking this record because we almost have like a millimeter of rainfall a day. Okay, we are now at the 13th and we have 14 point something millimeters already. Okay. Now compare that to some other part of the island which will have a higher rainfall. Okay, but the hazard is still there because it moves together like that. Okay, so everybody now has to be conscious of maybe where you live and what is your rainfall total, what is your rainfall condition. Similarly, the various sectors now have to be aware of what a particular rainfall threshold may be. For example, I mean, it's good news for NAWASA.
Indeed.
It's good news for fire, okay? But it might be bad news for the sporting industry. I mean, you have sports, you have cricket, those sort of things. So, So the various sectors now have to have their feet on the ground. They have to know what are the particular thresholds for their industries and how would that affect their operation.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because very often there's information that's coming from different sources. How do we then evaluate in our minds when you look at what's happening to islands up north, you're looking at Cuba, you're looking at Jamaica, where there's this growing concern that, listen, we're in for a difficult time?
No, well, that is where the stakeholders have to be absolutely aware. Okay, now conditions vary from island to island. Okay, the larger territories, are different. Guyana has 2 distinct rainfall seasons. Okay, so they have their own microclimate to deal with as a nation. Now we in the Eastern Caribbean are different. Okay. Even for, I think, next month, I think St. Vincent would be under a drought watch, okay? But we would not be under.
Explain that to me. I mean, St. Vincent, that's a boat right away. That's Osprey away.
Yeah, okay. It depends on a number of factors, okay? It all depends on the local climate, okay? It depends on a lot of how does the climatologist see the rainfall occurring from time to time. Now remember, St. Vincent, even though it's a boat ride away, okay, they would be affected more by the systems coming from the north than us. Okay? Right. 200 miles makes a difference. Okay, so all these little factors come into play, and that is why it is so important that you deal with your own local condition. Okay, forget what happened in Jamaica, forget what happened in Antigua, but deal with your own condition.
And I specifically made those references because very often social media has a way of clouding people's mind. Access to information, while it is good, it can, but certainly it can become your own worst enemies. And we want to say to you, the general public, that we do encourage you that we gauge our conversation based on the team at the Met Office, because people somebody sent me information. Wow, folks, you guys looking for it. You guys buy an extra water, and I'm like, like that's not the conversation that we are having here. But I want to shift the conversation back to NAWASA as it relates to, because very often NAWASA comes in, they take a beating at times. You open your tap one day in 6 months. The day there isn't water in that tap, I am going off on a tantrum. But certainly I know for NAWASA there's, what is one of the plans and measures that's in place right now so as to ensure that capacity and storage is taken care of?
Okay, so from the forecasting, we can then develop our dry season plan. We have a rigid monitoring program of our dam levels. So our plant operators on a daily basis collect productivity data. We monitor key parameters such as the dam levels, the rainfall levels, our storage tank levels, which we call our clear wells at the plant. That's our treated water supply. We also monitor the quality in terms of turbidity. With these parameters, we can tell the public the volume, the flow, and the quality of water they would be receiving. Once we see these reduction in the dam levels, our team can then determine when our valving schedules can be put into place. We also have our truck-borne supplies to rely on, which are free of charge and readily available upon request. We also have communal tanks in certain areas like Gonkai, Marion, and Mondelez, so that if areas are restricted, the access is restricted, people can still access portable supply.
But is that a challenge now for you? How much of it, I mean, there's some areas, for me, for example, in Springs, the issue of water, while I always have water, I've noticed though that the pressure is very much reduced as compared to 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Well, there are different reasons why the supply might have been reduced. As my colleague spoke about in terms of the frontal systems that would have presented itself in the dry season. The thing about our dam behavior is that too little water or too turbid water is difficult to treat because our treatment process requires a lot of settlement in the basins and filtration, and it takes time. So if there's excessive rainfall, you would find that the ability to treat the water is also reduced, and therefore you would have a reduction in the distribution of the potable supply.
I want us just to spend some time there for a specific reason, because very often the public may make comments, they may chide you because of lack of understanding of processes and procedures. And I'm listening to you here now. It makes sense to me that too much of one thing is good for nothing. But then there are those who would argue, well, why when you get the excess water, why don't you store it somewhere, maintain a minimum amount that can be treated?
Okay, so all our facilities have what we call a treated water supply in our clear well. This is what is distributed. We also have upcoming projects to supply and install additional storage tanks, 4 to be exact, for 500,000 gallon storage tanks in critical areas, and this would also increase the ability to distribute in harsher times. So apart from that level of storage, we also have to look at our non-revenue water. So we have that portion of water that is treated, distributed, but it doesn't reach the customer. And that's due to certain losses in terms of between your meters. So the causative factors could be simply defective metering or leakages, and by clamping down on those problems, we can ensure maximum available water supply reaches the customer.
I'm getting the sense, though, that there's a lot that the customer can do from their end to ensure that steady, satisfactory quality of water.
Well, we would receive such complaints and rigorously deal with them. But from our communications department, we always advocate for our customers to ensure they practice water conservation techniques at home and to have additional storage supplies at their homes, be it tank or drums or barrels.
We're going to get into that aspect of the conversation, additional water storage and saving techniques. The RGPF, we talked about your concerns during the period, and I know you always encourage best practices as well. The same way NAWASA encourages best practices in terms of tips for the consumers and house owners. The RGPF certainly also encourage best practices during the dry season, Sergeant.
Yes, we do encourage best practices for the dry season because in the end, we want to limit the occurrences of fires to as low as reasonable possible. And if we put out the information that will cause behavioral change in the citizens, then we will achieve a lot. So over the years, the fire department has embarked on a series of public education programs to create awareness of the hazards associated with fire, whether it's structural fire, vehicular fire, bushfires. Yes, we have been front and center trying to educate the public, and we realize we are getting some traction. More and more people are calling the fire station to get information relative to the procedures to burn. We also observe a marked increase in the amount of licenses received from the Ministry of Agriculture for persons who intend to set fires in agricultural lands. Yes? Persons who traverse various areas will call the station and say, oh, I noticed a fire at this point. So we haven't that kind of cultural change. However, we want to further solidify it, so we could get in more of the pie than the small pieces that we are getting. So tonight's program will further push that agenda for the fire department and the Royal Grenadier Police Force point of view, because it's important that we take preventative measures as early as possible to prevent or to avert the occurrence of bushfires, which can have serious effect on life, property, and the environment. And we must do everything reasonable possible within our own space to reduce the risk of fires to as low as reasonable possible.
Reducing the risk, I know certainly you'll be all bonkers when you meet your target. But let's revisit the conversation about licensing to burn. And I know there are those like myself who have respiratory challenges. I go home, I see fire, Jerry, and it just triggers me off. How does the RGPF treat it? How do you issue licenses? Do I just call and say, well, yo, officer, I want to burn? Well, or is there a procedure, a protocol that allows for those?
There is a legislation that deals with the burning of certain fires on agricultural land. It is referred to as the Agriculture Fires Act. It is in Volume 2 of the 2010 Continuous Revised Edition of the Laws of Grenada. The competent authority for granting license under this act is the Ministry of Agriculture. Yes? So persons who are so desirous of setting fire on lands that is used for agricultural purposes are being procured for agricultural purposes. He or she must apply to the Ministry of Agriculture, to the Chief Extension Officer, for a license to do so. Yes? He or she may apply in writing or in person for a license. The license costs $0 and no cents. Right? It's free of charge. Right? So what you need to do as an individual, you have a portion of land, you're a farmer, you intend to do farming.
But hold for me. You said agriculture of land, now we're saying a portion of land. Yeah. And I understood the agriculture of land element of it. And is consideration given to where those agricultural lands are located in context to residential areas?
Well, it comes down to zoning, and we don't have that zoning policy in place, right? So according to the acreage, you have portion will be considered to be residential, and another portion will consider to be agricultural. You understand? If we had that zoning policy in place, where we're going to say, oh, these are residential areas, and over here is for farming purposes, so then we create a distinction. But in the environment we operate, all right, persons do farming within what we refer to as residential areas. Somebody have their backyard, or probably they might have a large portion of land, and they are growing the cabbages, the tomatoes, the corn, the peas, and so forth in the backyard. So that portion of land is considered to be agricultural. Again, the person who is making the application, once they make the application, the Chief Extension Officer has the right to carry out an inspection, to send either he send himself or a competent person to inspect the land and to determine whether burning is necessary. Yes?
Okay.
So once that inspection has been done, then a license will be granted to you, right? However, the chief extension officer, in his own deliberate judgment, can deny you a license.
How often is the issuance of a license
We have
denied,
several
though?
locations. We have several locations where people applied for license and they didn't. They was not successful in getting the license, right? Because the inspecting officer realized, if we set the fire here, we could affect a large portion of people. So
Okay.
the license was not granted. However, the person who so feel aggrieved, he or she can apply to the minister, and that's the Minister of Agriculture for redress.
I'm probably suggesting there should be a separate independent body. When you give people the power to go directly to the minister, boy, it's a whole Pandora's box you're opening there. But that's not those conversations for tonight. We're getting ready to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll be looking at the various changes that we've seen to our weather patterns and cycle, and probably speak to what are some of the concerns. What is it really and truly is inducing some of those changes, and how does NAWASA and other stakeholders seem to benefit, or others who may have a difficult time in those changes. Take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
But when you need someone to help you to your feet, I'll be that beacon to your highest peak. I'll be right next to you, no, I will never leave. Come on, take my hands, we got everything we need. Cause you can look to me, yes, I can. Whenever you're in need, yes, you can. Just call on me and I'll be on my way. I'll be by your side, never to divide. The light that shines our way. Wherever your road leads, we'll be right there with you. Wherever your road leads, we'll make your dreams come true. Next time, next time, next time, next day, oh.
Nexa Credit Union, with you wherever your road leads.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Do you have muscular pain that no one can find a solution for? Are you tired of taking meds for joint and other pains? Hills and Valley Medicare Center on Grenville Street, St. George is here to help you heal. We will help you map a path to your full recovery. Visit us Monday to Saturday for a consultation with our on-site doctor, physiotherapist, and massage team. You will be glad you did. Our Medicare Center, a proud member of the Hills and Valley group of companies. On the hilltop or in the valley, we are with you wherever life takes you. Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Your health is our business.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
You ate well, drank and indulged, laughed and had so much fun for the festive season. But now it's time. It's time for some serious detox business at Nirvana Detox Center and Natural Health Store. Start the year right with your health as a priority. Cleanse and flush your blood, liver, and kidneys with quality herbs and supplements. Purchase one of our detox combo packs starting from $100. Purchase a full body detox pack starting from $500. Get 10% off on colonic irrigation. Get a chance to win a free colonic irrigation treatment and product coupons with every purchase. We are located in Grandin, minutes before the Food Fair Shopping Center, immediately opposite the old Capital Bank building in the Regency Commercial Suites. Give us a call at 231-6642 or 418-7115 or visit nirvana.gd for more info. It's time for some serious detox business at Nirvana Detox Center and Natural Health Store. We know real body care. This offer is valid until March 31st, 2023. Terms and conditions apply.
"19 minutes on to the hour of 9 o'clock. I want to say thank you and welcome back to the program. For those of you just joining us, we say thank you. And let again just reintroduce my guests as we go through it. We segue into the next part of the conversation. Cecile Mitchell, manager of Med Office, Sergeant Thaddeus Hamilton, the man himself, we call him Brother Gerry Tamar, climatologist from NAWASA, quality and production manager, Shamila Ragoobir, and joining us via Zoom, Dr. Terrence Walter from NADMA. Thank you, Terry. Thanks for being part of the conversation. We did promise as soon as we come out, we're going to try to put things into perspective, Gerry and Cecile. Our weather patterns, everything seems to be more extreme now. It's as though while our parents teach us moderation, when it comes to the weather, it is really extreme. It's either excessive rain, excessive dryness. What's behind it? Is there causative elements that we're not aware of? Gerry?
Well, what we can say is that we have, in the meteorological and climatological society worldwide, people who are charged with the responsibility of monitoring the Earth's atmosphere and the processes. It is obvious that there is a change in what is happening. Okay, we hear no terms of global warming, climate change. Okay. What we do know and what we can see is that things are changing. Patterns are changing worldwide. Okay? The argument is what is causing it, but that's a difference. But the fact of the matter is that it is changing. And in our local conditions here in Grenada, we are seeing the change. Okay? Now, in every climatic season, there will always be extremes. Okay, there will always be extremes. Okay? We are seeing some of the extremes getting more extreme. Okay? We are seeing some changes in patterns. Okay? And that is just something we have to live with. That is what's happening not only in Grenada but globally. Our rainfall pattern over the last 20-25 years, where we would normally have a relatively gentle rainfall curve when it comes, like we lower the first part of the year and it goes towards the end of the year, it rises nicely. Okay? Okay? We are now seeing a little bit more ragged rainfall. Okay? But
is that good, Cecile?
That's good, but just to add a little to the discussion, just in terms of the warming, if you think of warming heating up, right? So the atmosphere is heating up, the oceans are heating up, and what that means is that you have more energy in the atmosphere, energy to drive storms, to drive waves, to drive thermals, the to drive cyclones, and with that energy, of course, you can understand why we're having so much severe storms. For instance, on an average day you've seen in Grenada sometime in the afternoon, you may just have an eruption of thunderstorms, daytime heating, and instability breeding, thunderstorms, gusty winds, and that's the extremes that we're talking about. Then you also have conditions, phenomena that drive the climate, like La Nina and El Nino, right? You can just break that down a little bit. The largest ocean is the Pacific, and during the La Nina phase, what happens is that you have stronger trades that push the waters further to the West Pacific. That, of course, you now have a warm pool, and like I would have explained earlier, that warm pool breeds instability and cloud development, thunderstorms. So you will find during the La Nina years, places like Indonesia and New Zealand and Australia experience a lot of flooding and so on. Whereas during the El Nino, you have a shift in that wind and pressure and temperature pattern. So you now find during the El Nino years, when the trades weaken, you find those waters moving further towards Peru and Ecuador. So now they will have the flooding and the extremes, right? So these are some of the climate drivers that's causing the disruption in the weather.
As a quality production manager for you, Lady Ragoobir, it's important for you that you keep a constant conversation with Met, because certainly that would drive policies and what you do in ensuring that we have good quality drinking water. I know in more recent times there's been a number of expansive drives by NAWASA. There's been one on the south of the island, a major project that took from the St. David, that eastern corridor, right on to the south. What can you tell us of some of those other expansion plans that NAWASA has?
Okay, so my colleagues, they were speaking about the extremities. And that brings us to the topic of raw water storage versus treated water storage, so that in the event of an extreme weather pattern, we can still have the capacity to treat a raw water supply. One of the projects we have on board is where we intend to take a source of supply from the Adelphi area. It's called the Seven Sisters Project, and we want to transmit that water into our Les Avocats basin. That allows us to have more available water to treat. So that accounts for an additional raw water supply in the event of extreme weather. So that's one project that's underway. With respect to what would have been termed the UK CIF CDB project, currently CDB is on island and discussions are continuing on the way forward with that South Water Supply project.
Let's talk about the quality of water. There are occasions, some may argue, where the quality of water in the tap, it begs questions to be asked. What's NAWASA's take on that, and how are those issues addressed with? Because very often persons don't normally deal with it too nicely. When I open my tap, I want to see what I think and should always be adequate drinking water.
Okay, so since my start of employment at NAWASA 11 months ago, I recognized the areas that historically would have had a repeated pattern of poor water quality. And one of the things we did at the Les Avocats facility, for example, we instituted or reinstituted a 24-hour monitoring system for plant operators to be physically at this facility, so that in the event of a turbid condition at the dam, they can easily de-escalate the situation from that point. That has helped tremendously in improving the water quality that reaches our Richmond Hill storage tank and the distribution areas from that supply zone. So that is one initiative that was taken. Some other initiatives are our rigid sampling and quality checks that we do at all our treatment facilities and within the distribution system. And on a monthly basis, this data is collated, it's sent to me, it's analyzed, it's transferred up the line. And
I'm assuming, though, internally you do have your own customer satisfaction index that you use to measure, and if so, what can you tell us? How satisfied are you that you meet those targets?
Well, right now, because of the weather patterns we're seeing and the above normal levels of rainfall, the complaints have somewhat diminished because there's less quality issues that are rising at this point in time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They tend to happen during periods of major disruptions on the distribution systems. Yeah, so.
Okay. Let me draft you into the conversation, Terry. I know that you are there, and I need for you, if you can, to put into perspective NADMA's relationship with, we use the term stakeholders, and how pivotal is the management of that process for NADMA and for the function of those other stakeholders, Terry.
Yeah, well, good evening to the panel, good evening to you, Joseph, and to all the viewers and listeners. And thank you very much for having me on this program here. The stakeholders are very important to the organization, NADMA, and we depend on our stakeholders to get the work done. So all the work that we do, we depend heavily on our stakeholders. So for example, during the hurricane season and even outside of the hurricane season, with the weather, we depend heavily on the meteorological office to provide us with information so that we can give or pass to the general population in terms of severe weather and other events. And we depend on the Royal Grenadier Police Force in a number of areas, the fire department and Coast Guard. There are a number of areas in the police force that we depend on the personnel to provide support. And if we take that, even further to the private sector and other entities like the Grenada Red Cross, the St. John's Ambulance, the other community groups like the Youth Emergency Action Committee Group, and various other entities. We depend heavily on these groups to work, in the community, and so that we can reach the population as we ought to. But we also have our district committees across Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And so these committees are led by a district coordinator, and you have other members responsible for different areas. And again, they provide a significant level of service to the organization. So it is critical to ensure that our stakeholders are engaged in a way that we can come together to conduct the work of disaster risk reduction in our country. We also have what is called the National Emergency Advisory Council, where we have 13 subcommittees that are responsible for different areas. So it is absolutely necessary for the National Disaster Management Agency to engage our stakeholders across the country so that we can have a safer Grenada.
Do you get the sense, though, that NADMA's role is often limited to your functioning during the hurricane season or when there is a disaster of some sort? But do you think persons understand and appreciate your role when it comes to the quality of life that we enjoy, whether or not it is excessive rain or excessive wind or insufficient or scarcity of those resources?
Well, we focus heavily on preparedness, and preparedness is year-round. So we talk comprehensive disaster management, which is the management of all hazards through all phases by all people. And it is important that we do a lot of public education, information to the population, so that you understand what is the role of the agency, the role of our stakeholders, what's the role of individual households, members of the community. We have to ensure that we all understand our roles, and what we can do, and how we can do it. So, for example, we want the population to understand that while NADMA is, we focus heavily on the hurricane season because that's the hazard that can impact us most frequently. We focus a lot on the hurricane season, but outside of the hurricane season, we have to be preparing. We have to our trainings, getting our district teams ready, getting our drills done and so forth. And we live again in a multi-hazard environment where we're faced with several hazards. So during the hurricane season, we can have hurricane approaching, and while that is happening, you can have an earthquake, or you can have a volcanic eruption. So different things can happen.
But some may ask, Terry,
during the pandemic.
Some may ask you're talking about what's happening during the hurricane season. So some may ask, what does the dry season have to do with NAWASA? How do you become part of this conversation? What do you have to manage?
Right. So again, during the dry season, right, we do have all the other hazards that can impact us. We have severe weather, right? We have drought. We have fires. So that's why we have the officer from the fire department. Drought, so the meteorological office can, give us that early warning for drought and do the forecast. So whether we're in the hurricane season or outside of the hurricane season, again, year-round, it's comprehensive disaster management. So the management of all hazards to all phases by all people. Preparedness is year-round, and we want to emphasize that to the general population.
Let me ask you, I'm getting the sense, though, that NADMA's relationship with its stakeholders, it's possible that it happens at different levels. There are occasions when you take a frontal role, or occasions when you are the back-end support role that you offer?
Well, again, when it comes to disaster information relating to disaster, NADMA is the entity that will provide that information to the general population. All right, but depending on what is happening, all right, it all depends on what is happening. We would play, different roles. So yes, Joseph, I can say that.
Question for you, and then we're going to go back to the rest of my panel. The Met team is saying we're getting expectation of excess water. How much of a concern from NADMA's perspective is that?
Again, if the meteorological office is or has given a forecast, it's our responsibility now to pass it to the general population and to say to the population, okay, these are the impacts that you can anticipate, that you can expect. All right, so you can expect these things to happen. Well, they may not happen, or as well as they may happen, and you may have additional things happening. But once we get the forecast and we're satisfied that the information should go to the general population, we go ahead and pass it to the population. So it is important for us to get that information so that we can feed it to the general population.
I guess when we talk about boots on the ground, that's where NAWASA, that's where NADMA truly comes in. Boots on the ground. Thank you, Terry. We're going to coming right back to you, Shamila, as it relates to NAWASA. speak to me as the quality and production manager in terms of your distribution network. What drives it? I know we do census that the government used to obtain information on the quality of living. Your distribution network, is it done randomly or is it based on distribution of the population?
Oh, well, firstly, yes, you need the census, the data, to determine your current population demands. But we have a department that specializes in hydraulic modeling. So modeling reports dictate what the supply zone is, where the source is feeding into, what the networks look like in terms of the pipelines to feed the population involved, and the elevations, the topography, we take those factors into account. So therefore we can ascertain the flows and pressures required to reach the residents, and that's basically what a modeling report tells us. And we have been executing a lot of those to ensure we can adequately serve the supply zone.
And I'm assuming it has short, medium, long-term targets?
It depends on the census, yes, based on their predictions for population growth or decline, as the case may be.
Is it fair to assume, given that we've not done the census in a while, that NAWASA's data needs a little bit of fine-tuning?
Well, as you say, our customer feedback would let us know the extremities of the area where it's not being fed. So that speaks to how our distribution team would respond to such complaints. And when planning for new projects, we forecast an additional population growth factor into our design capacity.
What are some of the areas that are established and identified as areas that offer challenges to NAWASA in terms of its ability to meet its reasonable demand to its customer base in those areas?
During the dry season, definitely the Los Avocat facility tends to be somewhat depleted, and the available water tends to be a bit restricted to meet the demands of the supply zone. So that's where we would augment the portable supply with truck-borne services.
We're keeping our eyes on the clock. 5 minutes gone past the hour in the evening time. We are going to open up the lines in just a bit for you so that you can be part of the conversation. Coming back to you, Jerry and Cecile, we had the conversation about forecasts. And I often get a sense that persons do not quite appreciate the science or exactly what's happening. So you say this is going to happen, and we hear a lot of it during the hurricane season in particular. Well, you either hear that NADMA/MED didn't tell us, or it was coming, and all of a sudden it's not coming again. Jerry and Cecile have no idea what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, that's true. Our office come in for a lot of slack from the general public from time to time. But one has to understand what goes into a forecast and how a forecast is made, and especially a seasonal forecast, which of course is a bigger time scale. Okay, when you're looking at a seasonal forecast, for example, like for now, we would be looking at the months February, March, April. Okay, now the team at CIMH take a lot of different parameters into consideration. Okay? One of our main climate drivers is sea surface temperature. Okay? And we normally take that pool that goes from about 20 degrees north, about 45 or so degrees west into the Pacific. Okay, down to about 10 degrees south, can come back into the Atlantic. So it's a wide pool. Okay? Now that's quite a few 100,000 square miles. Okay? But the climatologists will concentrate on that area because that is what drives the whole our atmospheric condition. Okay? And they will do all of the modeling and so forth. Okay? Looking at all the other phenomena as Cecile mentioned, La Nino, El Nino, La Nina, all other climatic variables like the movements of the high pressure system through the Atlantic, all of these various factors. Okay? And then they put all of that into the mix and come up with a prediction. Now they would tell you, the end result is they would tell you probability 40% chance of above normal rainfall, or 40 or 30% chance of below normal rainfall. Okay? Okay? So you cannot get it any narrower than that.
It's just safe to say that a forecast is not God speaking to us.
No, a forecast is not God speaking. A forecast is us trying to understand what God is saying.
Because very often, Cecile, you get the sense that people think, well, it is absolute.
Yes.
And if the forecaster says it's going to rain, I walk with an umbrella. They says nothing's going to happen, but then the shower comes out of nowhere. Somebody's going to take the hot end of it.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have to be careful. Okay, now when you're making a forecast, the area under consideration, the larger the area, the bigger the margin of error, and the time scale of the forecast, the bigger the margin of error. Okay, for our local tri-island state, okay, we can have it pretty okay. Okay, that's a small enough area to be pretty accurate.
Before we take the break, let's talk RGPF. What's your focus for the next? Having listened, you have the team from Met, their projections. What's on your forecast?
Our focus is to be in a state of readiness at all times for any emergency that will require our assistance. Relative to the dry season, our vehicles are being serviced at present. We are making sure that all our small equipment like chainsaws and so forth are properly serviced and operational. We are checking our hose lines to make sure they are fit for purpose. We are forming up arrangements with our support services, for example with NAWASA, to ensure that the areas designated for the lifting of water and so forth, those areas are properly identified and the necessary equipment brought in to open up those areas. We are also forming up arrangements with our private water tank operators who are so generous to us. We are also forming up arrangements with SGU or volunteer firefighters and so forth, so we could be in a state of readiness to respond to any major fire that may occur. In the fire department, we are always ready to respond, yes? And as such, we do everything in our power to make sure that we could respond and respond effectively and take the proper actions to stop the forward progress of the fire. We also want to build stronger bonds with the communities by having community outreach programs to sensitize the public on bushfire safety and general fire safety, especially in villages that are so prone. You understand? Because it's important that we provide the information to these residents so they are the first responders, so they can deal with the situation if it occurs in their community within a reasonable time. Because taking into consideration the constraints of the fire department, especially if we have a very active dry season, we might be running 4 and 5 missions or 6 or 7, 8 missions that probably will go into 8 or 9 hours before we come to your area. You understand? So it's important that we foster those type of relationship with the community at large. So not only at St. George's, so we are also rolling out that in our various substations throughout the island to include Carrico and Carrico. Yes?
Thank you. 10 minutes past the hour. We take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll have a conversation with NAWASA regarding maintenance of his standpipes. Somebody's asking me, we're going to get into that. What is the role and responsibility? Some people have forgotten why there seem to be standpipes in some areas and why there doesn't seem to be others. For the fire, we're going to be getting appreciation. If possible, you can put us any stats we can on bushfires and so. When we come back, we'll also be entertaining your call. The number will be on screen, 440-1252. Beyond the headlines, we'll be right back.
WeatherGuard Pro. For every project, there's only one Pro.
Here is a little known fact. There is only one place in Grenada that you can get an MRI scan done. That place is Cecile Imaging Center. Yes, Grenada, that's the truth. Other centers could offer you other scans, but Cecile Imaging provides an authentic MRI scan. Here's another little known fact. Cecile Imaging has 3 centers. We operate at Grenville, the Carnage, and at the Ocean House, Grandlands. We provide the widest range of laboratory tests and services. CT scans, x-rays, mammograms, ultrasounds, and a host of other services. We are fully staffed by a team of family doctors and specialists. Call us today at 444-7679 or 440-1500. or visit any of our 3 locations. Cecile Imaging, from seeing the doctor to getting lab tests, scans, and pharmacy services. We are here to take care of you.
Your life is yours, your future's in your hands. Your body is yours, that's why you need a plan. You gotta plan your family, avoid HIV, get the education from the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
We offer STI screening, gender-based violence counseling, prenatal and postnatal checks, injectables, condoms, pap smears, and other sexual reproductive services. Open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. De Pointe Street, St. George's. Whether male or female, it doesn't matter. We're here to make your life better.
Grenada Planned Parenthood Association.
For appointments, call 440-3341.
A GPPA clinic may be in a health facility in your area. Information can be found via Facebook at the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association. Clinics are in partnership with the Ministry of Health and GrenChap. This ad is sponsored by Canada Fund for Local Initiatives.
Thank you. Welcome back to this edition of Beyond the Headlines. This evening, we're doing a whole lot of things. Our team this evening from Met Office Police, NAWASA, and our team from NADMA. As we put under the microscope this evening, the dry season as it is, we heard from Met Office that there's expectation above abundance of rain in the dry season. However, that does not fool you to whatever challenges on conversation as it relates to you being conservative and managing that which you do when it comes to water. Years ago, Shamila, we were used to, and I'm not sure why some people are even concerned, there is the use of standpipes and all these and all these sort of things as to why is it there you find standpipes in some areas and others nada.
Well, as far as I understand it, the location of standpipes are predetermined by parliamentary representatives. The maintenance of standpipes is usually under the entity, the Financial Complex Limited, which is an entity of the government that was raised to manage utilities. And the actual infrastructure, the standpipe infrastructure, is supposed to be under the maintenance of that financial complex. However, in the event of any reports of abuse of the standpipes, NAWASA would step in and assist to rectify the issue.
So we have been beaten on the wrong person for all these years then?
This is my understanding.
Okay, so for you folks who think it's NAWASA's fault that there isn't a standpipe in your area, I know you very often you love to call your MP. I think that would be a good time to get your numbers and do have a conversation with them. We talk about forecast, folks, as we do reminding you that the number on the inside is 440-1252, and feel free to chime in with whatever questions that you do have. we are in the dry season. Cecile, we did intimate there is above abundance of rain, but yet though all of this has to be gauged cautiously. While you pondering that though, there is a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Your question, please.
Could the lady from NAWASA explain why we just now into the dry season and we already have had no water in the mains for quite a few days?
Are you referring to a specific area?
I'm living in the south.
You live in the south. Okay. Thank you, caller.
Well, specifically, Barn, specifically where she's calling from the south, recently we at NAWASA would have had to step in to supplement some of our hotel supplies, and this would have negatively impacted the public. So that may not have been communicated right away. Some emergencies cannot be addressed or published to the public immediately, but however, we are continuously monitoring that.
And again, that adds to the conversation as why you always say to persons, and I know some people that's troops in right now, keep excess supply of water. We're going to go back to the telephone lines. Good evening, caller. You're live.
Good night, gentlemen. Now, what's our first thing? Now, what's our pipe? I think busting the menu, I think it's by Regal Cinema. What I'm looking for the middle of the road by Regal Cinema.
By Regal Cinema. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you, sir.
That's another point is discussed in any case.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now, sir, during the dry season time and during fire time, you're allowing the fire brigade to use to run out fire. Why don't make the fire brigade use river water instead?
Okay. Thank you,
if you want to in your nation, so you have to use water for concrete structure, for flowers garden, for your toilet. Use of water. How do you water in days to come, in time to come?
Okay, sir. Let me allow the team to respond. So his concern is, and of course, assuming that his assessment is correct, maybe RGPF, you can step in here to offer some guidance on the question.
Related to the use of treated water, one have to take in consideration the location of the fire. Sometimes the fire is in a location where there is no open source. So we'll have to tap into the supply from NAWASA as to bring the fire under control. If it is in an area where we have access to an open source, we will so do. Yes? So that is why we are really encouraging people to really cease from burning out on those types of things. Where water, what is designated for domestic use, have to be used for fire suppression, and it could be probably a couple thousands of gallons of water that is going to extinguish fire, when that supply of water could have been transmitted to householders, so persons could have a reliable supply of water. Yes.
Do you get the sense, though, that persons, the general public, ever see the direct correlation in the two? So the fire truck makes 100 trips to go get some fire. Because of your carelessness, you decide, well, let me burn. I call the fire brigade, they come, they out. And then 2 weeks later, you complain, well, in the same area, I don't have any water in my pipe. What's wrong with NAWASA?
And if NAWASA is doing valve regulation, it will take that community a longer time for it to get back that supply of water. Because let's suppose we use approximately 15 to 35,000 gallons of water for the operation. All right? So think about the amount of household that would be left without that water.
Okay, let's see if we can do the maths quickly. An average bushfire, let's say an average bushfire which you attend to, how much water would you use, let's say?
It all depends on the size of the fire.
Let's take the
magnitude,
area.
Let's say probably 2 acres or acre and a half, a quarter of an acre. It all depends on the type of fuel. Sometimes you're dealing with bushfire and it's just basically grass. Some of the fires involve tree limbs, logs, and so forth. So it will take a longer time to contain and control the fire. Yes? Or sometimes on some operations we use no water. We use what we refer to as a dry method, right? Where we create fire lines and so forth, and have the fire burn right just out in the middle where it is. You understand? So,
do you think there need to be a general conversation team as it speaks to a change of culture. We've grown up in an environment where we assume that water is the unending resource. We're born into it, yeah, we'll die, we're going to leave it here. I'm getting the sense that that conversation needs to change, Shamila.
So the conversation needs to change when our stakeholders and our utilities tend to have a more synchronized relationship. I think we have started that, especially through NADMA and liaising as fellow coordinators from a disaster relief perspective. We can even go beyond that and use our communications department to highlight the challenges we would face, especially during the dry season, with firefighting requirements and the diminishing supply that is now left to feed the population. So communication is definitely.
We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Yeah, good night. So how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Your question, comments, please, sir. We lost the caller? Okay, we lost the caller. Thank you again. The number 440-1252. You can see it on screen. Gerard, the reality is, and Cecile, so too, you can chime in as we wind down. There needs to be a change of culture. Very often, people get into the argument, climate change, yes, no, cause and effects. That's a different comment. I always say, let the experts deal with this. What we can all agree is that compared to 30 years ago, water is becoming less and less. And I don't think we've gotten to a point of it being a scarcity, but certainly you would agree, Jerry, that we need to be able to start managing the way we think and see water as a resource.
Well, definitely. We have noticed a change in rainfall patterns. Okay? So that should alone tell us that we have to change our behavior or our activities. Okay, it's all a matter of adapting. Yeah, we have to prepare now that we will get some more intense rainfall. Okay, the distribution throughout the months and the days will differ. Okay? So we now have to do a lot of things differently. We have to now take into consideration a lot more flash flooding and so forth. Maybe build differently. Okay. For the water sector, they may have to do different things for their storage capacity and so forth. Okay, but we, as you rightly say, we believe that we are born with the gift of water and it's always there, and Papa God will always send rain, okay? But the supply is changing, and as human beings, we have to learn that we have to change our activity.
And Terry, you would agree, though, that very often that's the difficult part of the conversation. How do we change culture? And you would agree that while it is difficult, it might be a challenge, it is imperative that we change those cultural patterns. Terry?
Yes, what we're trying to do is to create a culture of safety in the Caribbean region, and we take it home locally. Now, shifting the culture requires a lot of public information and education, engaging your communities, being practical, and getting people involved in disaster management, emergency management. And we have to continue. It's a continuous process. Preparedness never ends. Okay, it is a continuous process. And so, yes, Joseph, that culture of safety that we're trying to develop, we have to continue to work with everyone to ensure that we achieve the gains that we set out to.
Thank you, Terry. We have another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. We've lost that caller. The hardest part, or the easiest part, Shamila, is that of establishing policies. And I know even to at NAWASA every year, we often tips in terms of, listen to me, I have my vehicle to wash, I'm going to wash it down. I have to do what I have to do, I'm going to do that. I'll let you churn on that for a bit, but we're going to go to the caller in right now. Hello, caller, you're live.
Yeah, pleasant good night to you.
Good night to you, sir.
Yeah, I want to ask NAWASA a question, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, now I would like to find out what is the reason why that when the rain falls, that the water comes dirty from the top. What solution do you all have in place that when the rain falls and the water dirty, what all you have in place to stop this dirty water from coming to the top, please?
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so we do realize this is an area that needs to be improved. In some areas, we already began that by having a more rigid monitoring program, a presence of a plant operator, which eliminates that or causes a barrier between the dirty water getting into the distribution system. In other areas where they're more remote, we are planning to install turbidity sensors. So these sensors will definitely aid in measuring the turbidity count in the water supply being received, and it will shut off the system so as to not allow that dirty water to get into your distribution mains.
Continues to be a work in progress. 26 minutes gone past the hour. The number on the inside, 440-1252. We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Good night, gentlemen. I'll call back again. I'm talking to NAWASA directly. NAWASA have been for the past years on the old one pipe. In any case, on pipe on the wall about the galvanized pipe. And it was in very quick. I'll give advice, put some PVC inside the galvanized pipe, and it will have, and it will water much safer every day, and the pipe will last longer. Because when you put the PVC galvanized pipe with the water, it rusty very quick. I know what the problem with the chlorine causes the rusty. So if you put a line in a pipe and inside it, that's PVC inside any one of the pipe and you deliver it, I'll give you advice.
Okay, sir.
And run some water to every home. Besides the treated water, you have two areas with treated water for somebody's home: the bathroom and the toilet. And the outside of your home now, your kitchen garden, your flowers garden, washing your car, your yard, and then use preserve water.
Okay, thank you, sir.
One made in everybody's home, two lines in everybody's.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Sometimes you get a sense that some things probably comes down to initiatives that one can take, but maybe there are times when individuals need NAWASA to tell them, listen, manage your resource. I want you to get through, because the time is winding down, on some of the tips that you normally offer, conservation tips. One, if you're going to wash your vehicle, get a bucket of water.
A bucket.
Let's go.
So that's a basic tip for washing our vehicles. Use a bucket. Don't use the hose. Don't use it from your main source of supply. You can even store water in barrels, especially for car washing facilities that do this as a business. You also want to conserve water via rainwater harvesting techniques. So you can use storage in that way at the house, and you can use that for cleaning. You can use that for maybe washing down the yards, so to speak.
Is that a conversation, though, rain harvesting technique?
So, yes,
is that NAWASA is open to having a conversation with the public?
We are actually in the initial stages of an initiative in certain areas where rainwater harvesting will be rehabilitated. So that is a conversation. But I wanted to speak to something that Dr. Waters would have alluded to, which involves changing in culture. NAWASA is evolving. We are evolving in terms of, under our G-Cruise initiative, projects are being implemented within this year and years to come that not only speak to improved service and quality for customers, but also ensures the health and safety of our workforce. And with those initiatives in mind, we always aim for continuous improvement, and in that way, and even in more communications of our initiatives, we will positively influence the public with things to come.
We have a caller on the line. Good evening, caller.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask Sergeant Hamilton a question to the fire department. Sergeant Hamilton, I just want to ask him that what they have in place that people who smoke like cigarette and they drive in during this dry season period and they just throw the cigarette butt on the side of the road and the place got the fire and then other people and get burned down. What charge do they have in place for this kind of a situation? Yeah, thank you.
Sergeant?
Thank you very much, caller, for your question. The whole idea about dropping or disposing of your cigarette butt indiscriminately amounts to littering. Yes? And once it can be proved that the individual did dispose of the cigarette butt indiscriminately, and which resulted in a bushfire, then that person can be prosecuted. Yes. So we are encouraging smokers, persons who smoke, farmers, and persons who go camping and so forth. After you finish smoke, make sure that your cigarette butt is properly out, right? Make sure you rub it into the ground or into a tree stalk and so forth. Or, as we normally say, if you could avoid smoking on your farm or on your camping site, it will be much better for us. Yes?
Or maybe if we probably consider the health repercussions altogether.
But not only farmers, but we have to look at heavy machine operators, the guys who operate tractors, bobcats, and so forth. But continuous operation of the equipment produces heat, and you could have spontaneous ignition of fuel within the area. We also take into consideration the persons who might be driving. You might probably go down to Point Celine or probably to Quarantine Park. You traverse a long distance. Your exhaust, your muffler is hot. You might park in an area where the fuel is very fine, and you could have a fire occurring from that. Yes. So there is several safety tips that one can follow relative to reducing the occurrence of bushfires.
I think more and more we honing in on the need for a change of culture and us recognizing that each and every one of us need to take responsibility for our actions and our inactions. We go back to the telephone line though. Good evening, caller.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, panelists. I have a question for the personnel from NAWASA. I have one for the person at the Met Office, for the police. But I will first start with Met Office. We are in an age of technology, but not everybody would have a cell phone. It sounds ridiculous. But how are you going to get around if someone do not have the access to these apps, an app to tell you the location of a storm if you cannot access the internet? Have you put that in? They send an app so you can actually see the location of a storm when it occurs, because some of us are able to. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes, some of us are able to access the internet and get information from other sources, but yet still you're told take your source from NADMA. That's one question. The other is to the police. Do you have a database of where fire regularly occurs in Grenada? And additionally, do you have intention to have a separate storage facility for raw water to be used in the eradication of fires or the control of fires? And to NAWASA, I've observed that approaching the periods before monsoon, there seems to be a regular occurrence of turbidity in the water whereby persons have to turn on the tap and allow that water to run up the meters. I've been observing that trend and I'm therefore venting it now. To me, that is very ridiculous. I'm not sure what is happening in your particular neck of the woods, but I've seen that trend occurring regularly. Can you shed some light? Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. I probably assume, how should we go? Ladies first. Jerry, you suggested, you hinting something to me? Cecile, ladies first.
Okay. Good evening, caller, and thank you for that question. We can appreciate that there are many sources of information. However, the information that is given at the meteorological office is simply tailored to the location of Grenada. So when the tropical weather outlook or advisory is given from the National Hurricane Center, you may get the coordinates with regards to Barbados, maybe 200 miles east of Barbados. What we would do at the Met Office is now tailor that information using Grenada's locality, and therefore we will also examine the impacts as it relates to the state of Grenada and of course the territorial waters for which we are monitoring. So hence the reason why we will always advocate that the information, you should use the authentic information from the Meteorological Office and from NADMA. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you.
Let me say thank you very much for the caller for his comments and question. Relative to fire occurrence, it occurs throughout Grenada, all over Grenada. So you cannot identify it to a particular location. So we have bushfires throughout various parts of Grenada. Yes? In terms of storage, it's something that probably we could look forward to in the future as the fire department grows and expand. I know one time the idea was discussed about using salt water, seawater. However, after analyzing it, we realized it's going to cost us more in the long haul in terms of maintenance of our engines and pumps and so forth. So I guess it's something we could work along with NAWASA in the future to see how we could have that pool of water at various parishes. So appliances or team can literally tap into them and so move. But again, if the caller was listening earlier on, we have that arrangement. So NAWASA, where we have catchment areas where we can lift water, right, in the dry season and so forth. So it's an exciting idea to take into consideration, and something we will explore in the future.
Do you have stats on the areas that are prone to bushfires, so at least it can make you more proactive or be able to monitor those areas?
Technically speaking, yes and no. All right, because sometimes in a particular year you have fires within that sector, and then for the next 2 years there is no fire within that sector. For example, we know over the years Mount Morris was one of the areas we had major fires. But you look at it for the past 2-3 years, you realize a reduction. You could go to St. Andrew and look at places like Belay. Right? We had a series of fires in Belay because people were clearing land for development and they were indiscriminate in burning. But now it becomes more residential, so you see a drop in the amount of fires. You go to St. Patrick's, Bathway. Sometimes persons indiscriminately park the vehicles or probably set fires to are doing cleanup, and the fire get out of control. So we have some areas that we know where fire occur, but as to give you data as to how much fires occur in Bathway, how much fires in Mount Morris and so forth, I don't have the data with me right now.
But do you have, as part of your investigation, do you have a data pool that says the cause of, that you can have a specific PR campaign in those areas so as to reduce? Or do you just leave it up to persons, that general conversation?
Our investigators investigate those fires and they come up with the information relative to the possible cause of the fire. I don't have the data with me tonight to share. However, I promise that we could make the data available for the edification of the general public.
Thank you. Lady Ragoobir, yes. I know you're probably thinking that if I got you. No. We saved the cup. So, they call us concern, legitimate concern, or is that a figment of his imagination?
No, it was raised earlier about the water quality, that people would see the poor water quality in their pipes. And I spoke about the monitoring, improvement of the monitoring of that water that leaves the plants. We also have to reinforce and reiterate with our personnel, both at the plants and on the distribution network, standard operating procedures for reintroduction of a potable supply, flushing, how do you deal with poor water quality when you do see it, and how do you reintroduce normal water quality back into the system. So there are standard operating procedures that we will be conducting training on for our personnel this year, and we intend to see an improvement in that aspect of the operations.
Thank you. We have a caller on the line, which should be the last caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, good night. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, sir.
Okay. I'm calling concerning the water pressure in the south and the availability of water in the south.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
As I mentioned earlier, we had some challenges within the tourism, the hotel industry, and we had to respond on a national level and ensure that the influx of tourists would not adversely affect it. Yes, you would have seen a negative effect on the pressures, but at the end of the day, NAWASA tries to ensure an equity in terms of sharing of the portable supply.
I was just about to ask you that. There's some could say, well, hello, you give the visitors, you make full allowances for them. What happens to me? I'm living here.
No, we do. So we tried our best, and it's also augmented by the truck-borne water supply.
Right.
Once the request is made.
Once the request is made. Terry, I know you are there, and I'm probably going to give you a chance to chime in because we've been looking at different elements of the conversation, and I think honestly, we've all gotten to the point where change of culture and an appreciation as to how we treat with information. One of the challenges I know for the Met team is access to information is good, but the question is, what do you do with the information that you have? And I know, for example, NADMA, Terry, you guys have been very wary of that. People getting information, and the easiest thing to do is just to forward. And very often during those types of challenges, that is not always the best of approach to take, is there?
Right, Joseph. So what we encourage people to do is, yes, you have access to the information. So it's available. It's available in several different areas. So we encourage you to, become involved, look at the information, look at what's available. But then again, we say to you, the official source is from NADMA and the Met Office. All right, that's the official source. So we will not discourage people getting information. We don't want to do that. Get the information, research, know what is out there. Right? But when Cecile spoke earlier about getting the information and tailoring it to suit our locality, and that's what is done. And so we're encouraging people to now get the information from either Met or from NADMA, and then you make decisions based on that. All right, but it's okay to get the information from whatever source it is, but the final analysis, the information from NADMA and Met Office, is what you should depend on.
Would you in any way agree, or how would you deal with the school of thought that seemed to suggest that NADMA, very often there are times when there seemed to be a delay in the communication channels, and people will ask, well, we've been hearing of a storm since, why is it that NADMA is only being drawn into the conversation 24 hours before, when I've been hearing it 48 hours, 72 hours prior?
I think here, Joseph, that we have a very good early warning system when it comes to hurricanes and storms. And I can say that the Meteorological Office, they do an excellent job in providing the information earliest, and we provide it to the public. Now, I think it's Gerard with Tamar who mentioned the area of concern. All right, so if it's outside of the area of concern, we provide updates. When it gets into the area of concern, then we start giving the more frequent updates and so. But generally, I must say that our early warning system for hurricane, storm, severe weather is quite advanced. and we do provide the information to the general public in a very timely manner.
Team, do you get a sense that, since coming on the heels of Ivan and Emily, because prior to that we had a quite nonchalant K-Sera attitude towards hurricanes and disasters, that since then, that while our senses have become sharpened, it is possible that it also triggers a little, it makes us a little bit antsy, that somebody would ask me, would call me, rain starts to fall heavy, Jerry, and they're asking, what's NAWASA, what's NADMA saying? And I'm like, hello, is the rain falling? What is the Met Office supposed to tell you? Rain is supposed to fall.
But Joseph, if I may come in here,
go ahead.
That's a very good thing for us, because it means that people are a lot more aware. Okay, I would say in the last 10, 15 years, people have become a lot more aware of what is happening around them with the advent of internet and information age. I think people are a lot more aware, which is a good thing. All right, we just have to channel those energies in the right direction, but it is a good thing.
I keep saying access to information is one thing. What do you do with the information when it's received is a totally different kettle of fish. And certainly as a people, we need to be able to understand and appreciate those things. And going back to NAWASA though, as they made reference to the challenge on the South, some have argued that they thought the issues with challenge on the South of the island, that was history.
I think this was an isolated incident with the somewhat malfunction of hotel's water supply. So it was more of a we coming to their aid so that on a national level we could assist.
Maybe we can probably argue it was a failure of NAWASA's PR team to communicate that information to the public?
I think we may have not have been as stringent as we should have, but I believe we got the information out.
Well, I can safely tell you, I remember the first time I opened my tap years ago, and I saw chlorine water in the pipe on the side. I said, hallelujah. But then I'd gotten used to borehole anyway. But it's an experience though. But really and truly, you long forget when you have chlorine water. Gentlemen, we're running out of time. We're running out of time. I need for you, Cecile, let's put it into context. What is the message going forward for the general public as it relates to what we've agreed would be above average dry season? In the context, there's a little bit more water, however.
Right. So we are still in the dry season. However, we expect some spikes in terms of rainfall that can lead to some occasions of severe weather. I want to give the public the assurance that we at the Meteorological Office are there 24/7, and we are going to be monitoring, detecting, advising you of hazards. Periodically, you may get an advisory from NADMA or a bulletin. It is nothing to panic about. We are just giving you the advanced information. Possibly it's a wet spell. It may disrupt your outdoor activity. It may disrupt your construction. So therefore, you need to have the information. However, you can rest assured that once there's any severe weather, you will be notified, and we are going to be working collaboratively with NADMA, because at the end of the day, at the heart of what we do are the people who are delivering the information and the people who are at the Met Office monitoring. So that's our message to you, that we are going to continue to monitor and advise you in a timely and reliable manner.
Jerry?
Well said. I just want to add also that a lot of this information about the climate forecast and updates, okay, are available, and I want to use this opportunity to encourage the public to read our monthly climate bulletin. It's something we produce every month. If you are not yet on the mailing list and you would like to be on the mailing list, you can call our office 444-4142 and ask that you be put onto the mailing list. This will also be available on our website, which will be available from next month, weather.gd. Okay. Also, you can go directly to the website of CIMH, the Regional Climate Center, CIMH.RCC, where you can get the whole regional outlook based whether it's temperature, rainfall, drought, coral bleaching effect, and there are various other med bulletins for the agriculture sector, the health sector. All of that is available there. So CIMH.RCC can give you all of that. So, but for our own local purposes, we strongly advise the use of our monthly climate bulletin. And again, you can be added to the mailing list by just contacting our office and providing an email address.
Well, folks, I can assure you that I am on the list. If at any point in time you don't have access to it, give me a call. And don't necessarily think you want to call Jerry and Cecile to disturb them unnecessarily, understanding the nature of what they do. Give us a call here at the GBN. And we want to get people into the culture. And we keep talking about culture, Terry, and we'll get in a word to you as we wrap. That persons need to start thinking in their minds a procedure. You would always want, in the case of any emergency, that you have a clear line of thought as to what I'm going to do. And if I start thinking, let me not call the Met office, let me call GBN, instead of maybe calling to complain about a lot of the other things we complain, we find out from them, what is NADMA saying? Stay close to your radio and listen. Correct? Is that a reasonable advice, Terry?
Well, added to that, having your family disaster plan is quite important, and as we develop and advance this culture of safety, we want to get the population involved. We want to also encourage people to become volunteers with the National Disaster Management Agency, because the culture of safety requires action from every individual in the population. It's just about every individual.
Thank you, Terry. We do have to go to official wrap, but we need to take a quick commercial break and right into the point on Beyond the Headlines. Sorry.
Last week on All Climate Reality.
What we're encountering is something we're calling an enhanced greenhouse effect. This is a phenomenon where the gases that create the greenhouse of the atmosphere are increasing in concentration.
The amount of concrete that we have in our society now compared to 30 years ago is amazing, because when the sun hits that, it's not getting into the soil where we have carbon sequestration happening. So that bounces back and goes back into the atmosphere and increase the carbon dioxide stock. But a lot of people want to live on the slope, so we deforesting the slopes, and trees is one of the biggest inhibitors of carbon dioxide. They take in so much of it. So every tree we cut means that there is going to be an increase in us producing greenhouse gas, and increasing our greenhouse gas.
Join us this Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Our Climate Reality as the discussion delves into the impacts of climate change. GBN Television, Channel 7 and 11, K105, and all our social media platforms.
Get Rubigas. Get cooking. Rubigas, clean, safe, and reliable LPG is the perfect solution for your commercial and everyday needs. For cooking at home or barbecuing, choose Rubigas LPG cylinders. Available in a variety of sizes from 20 to 100-pound cylinders. Rubigas LPG, clean, safe, reliable. Are you cooking with Rubigas?
Get Rubis, get going.
Thank you. Welcome back to the program. For those of you that's just joining us, I want to say thank you. And for those of you that's probably been with us for the last 2 hours, indeed it was a pleasure. We're getting ready, literally, we're about to wrap, and we'll give each of our principals about 30 seconds each so that they can get their final 2 pence in. And we're going to start with you, Dr. Walters, so you're there with us virtually. Your final toss at the ball?
Well, thank you again for this program, very informative. And we are in the dry season, and the forecasters, have given us, their professional advice. Now, I want to say here that climate change, is real. We hear about climate change, and so we have to understand that it is real, and the hazards are becoming, or they're behaving differently. They're becoming more frequent, more intense, and we have to be mindful of that. We have to make the decisions, the changes that are necessary to ensure that we can respond adequately to the changes that we're seeing with the various hazards. So again, just to re-emphasize, it is imperative, it is important for every one of us to play our part as we talk about disaster risk reduction, disaster management, and developing that culture of safety. Because that culture of safety, people will think safety when you're doing your planning, safety first, just about everything you're doing, you're thinking safety first at home, at work, at church, at school, wherever you are. So we do encourage everyone in the population to get involved in disaster risk reduction.
Thank you, Dr. Walters. Jerry, 30 seconds.
Okay, well, just to remind the general public that we are indeed in the dry season. Just remind you that the seasonal forecast is just for above normal rainfall. Now, I really don't want the public to go away feeling that we'll have a whole set of rain during the dry season and the place will be green and so forth. Dry season produces its own atmosphere, so you would have the dry spells, you would have the dropping of leaves, etc. But we just have a little bit more rainfall for that normal. And at normal depends on where you are, what is normal for your locale. Okay, as a nation, we have what we consider normal rainfall, so we expect just a little bit more rainfall, and it's up to us now to use that information and to use that that added rainfall for our benefits. The farmers might be happy with that. NAWASA would be happy, fire would be happy, but I just want people to not leave here tonight thinking that we will have a whole set of rain during the dry season. That's not what it is. Dry season produces its own atmospheric situations, but we will have a little bit more rainfall than normal, and it's up to us to make use of it.
Thank you, Jerry. Sergeant Hamilton?
Well, based on what Dr. Walters and my colleague Jerry just mentioned, I want us to be in a state of preparedness. Notwithstanding the focus calls for rain, however, prevention is better than cure. And as citizens, we must be in a state of preparedness or in a state of readiness to respond to any situation that occur. We must make sure that as far as possible, we take all the necessary precautions to avoid bushfires. To our friends in the farming community who are excited about the rains and so forth, just a gentle reminder that if you have to set fires on agricultural land, you have to apply to the Ministry of Agriculture for a license. Yes? While we prefer that you use alternative means from burning, yes, probably composting and so forth, because the Solid Waste Management Authority have that program going on, and we would prefer that you tap into the resource so you have an alternative than burning. To homeowners, we want to encourage you to create that fire breaker around your home and so forth, so you could have that level of safety, adequate storage of water and so forth. You want to look at your roof right? And if you live in areas that are prone to bushfires, you need to get somebody up on the roof, pull out all the straws or the twigs and so forth that is in the spouting and so forth, right? And if you need any additional information relative to bushfire safety and general fire safety, please feel free to contact the fire station closest to you. Our officers will be more than happy to provide you with the information.
Thank you, Sergeant Hamilton. Manager of forecasts at the MBIA.
Yes, Joseph. In closing, I just want to reiterate that to be forewarned is to be forearmed, and so we continue to urge you to pay attention to the daily forecasts and pay attention to the information that is being given to you by the Meteorological Office. It would be remiss of me if I did not say a heartfelt thank you to the men and women at the Met Office who are there 24/7 providing vital service to ensure that lives, livelihoods, and people are safeguarded at all times.
Thank you. And Lady Ragoobir, Manager of Production and Quality Control at NAWASA, your final thoughts for the evening?
I wish to underscore to the public that whilst we do have these initiatives to not only aid in improving the customer service and quality, and we also have programs to aid in changing the culture within the authority, we also want to encourage persons, please remember their water conservation practices at home and to have additional storage at all times.
Have additional storage at all times. And shall I remind you that knowledge is in fact power. Power to make a difference, not just in your life or in my life, but the life of our communities, the life of our families, and the world at large. Information has been given. The question is, what will I do with the information that has been communicated to us this evening? To all our listeners and viewers, wherever you are, we say thanks for being part of this conversation that's just concluded right here on Beyond the Headlines. Until then, so long everybody. Have a great one.